Joe Schoen has spoken. He talks about the Giants after their Monday Night Football debacle, why he should be the one to guide the Giants into the future. But I'm here to tell you all the reasons why he should not be. And if he somehow survives the season, why it is a nightmare scenario for the New York Giants. All that and more coming up on this episode of Rich Sports Talk. Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the latest episode of Rich Sports Talk. Thank you for joining us here today. If you're new to the channel, like and subscribe so you don't miss our latest live stream. Follow us on X and on Instagram using the handle @Rich Sports Talk. If you missed the show or you just want to take us on the go, there's good news, ladies and gentlemen. You can always take us in your pocket. We are available on any podcasting service. And again, if you're in our live stream, super chat to jump to the front of the line. Of course, give your comments and thoughts. We'd love to get your opinions in the video because you guys help make it. So Joe Schoen was surprising a little bit today. He came on to talk about the state of the New York Giants. And after an embarrassing Monday night game where just about everything that could go wrong went wrong, kicking mishap that will be a gift for future generations. You see the prize number one pick being benched once again for being late for meetings. So Joe Schoen met with the media today. And of course, we all know when Brian Daboll was released, the statement that came out from the Giants was that Joe Schoen would be in charge of the next head coaching search. Again, I think it's more of a footnote. I think they're going to reevaluate, but I have a lot of thoughts if Joe Schoen somehow survives this job to the end of the season. I'll give my thoughts in a little bit, but we'll love to hear from you. A couple of the big comments from Schoen: 2 wins is not where you want to be. He adds that no one is more frustrated than him. But I also think that this was a very interesting thing in a defense mechanism, which I don't really agree with. He said it's not been good enough, and again, that's the title of this video, and I agree. He hasn't been good enough, and the Giants haven't been good enough. But Joe Schoen said this today. Schoen pointed out that his scouting staff were all well aware of Jackson Dart before Brian Daboll because he was in the middle of coaching. Calls drafting the Dart a, quote, organizational decision, and it looks like it's going to pay off. So on the surface, he's right. It is an organizational decision. It was the scouting. It was meeting with him in person. But at the end of the day, it came down to Brian Daboll. From every source you hear covering the Giants, it was a split room. And the reason that this has really stuck out is, again, video is everywhere with these drafts. And when you heard Joe Schoen say, okay, you can have your quarterback, and they traded back in to get Jackson Dart, look, if anything, your scouting maybe doesn't look that great because you also had the 3rd overall pick in the draft, and you chanced Jackson Dart, who you're saying is, quote, a franchise quarterback, into the late 1st round. And let's be honest, we all know Brian Daboll was the one that preached because, again, it basically was, here's the scouting, here's the video, who do you like, Brian Daboll, in this draft class? And basically, Daboll, from all accounts, had final say on what quarterback he wanted. And to be fair to Brian Daboll, Joe Schoen has kind of been the one to hang him out to drive the quarterback position. They could have moved on from Daniel Jones or franchise tagged him after that first season, but they didn't. They could have tried to trade up for Drake May and give a boatload of picks to move up in that draft. They didn't. They could have drafted a Michael Penix. They didn't. They could have taken a flyer on a Joe Milton in that same draft. They didn't. So Joe Schoen all of a sudden is now like trying to take credit after the group project. Hey, but by the way, you know that fact that we found that was all me. It was all my team. We're the ones that found Jackson Dart. Okay. So he also talked about his drafting. The chances of me banging 1,000 are gone. He's made mistakes. Have I screwed up? Have I made mistakes? Absolutely, but he won't make the same mistake twice. Schoen adds that he's better at his job now than he was 4 years ago. You know, that's funny, Joe. Your first season, I can recall that you went 9-7-1 and had a playoff berth. Okay. What have you done since then? And I thought this was an interesting stat today because with last night's loss, over the past 5 years, the Giants have had the worst record in NFL. Not the Browns, not the Jets, the New York Giants. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is with a season where they made the playoffs and won a playoff game. I crunched the numbers because Joe said, I'm doing a better job than my first season. Okay. So your first season, you won 9 games. Okay. Does anyone want to take a gather what Joe Schoen's record is over the last 3 seasons? Anyone? I have it for you. Joe Schoen is 11-36. That is a 23.4% winning percentage, which means the Giants win less than a quarter of their games. Is that really much better? I don't know. I mean, the data's right there. It doesn't seem much better to this. And Joe Schoen, we're going to get this right. We're going to get this right. Well, wasn't the whole thing last year at the end of the season that, all we need is the quarterback. I mean, look at this roster. This roster's fantastic. We got a great team. We got the great coaching staff. All we need is the quarterback. Well, you have the quarterback, but correct me if I'm wrong, it's going worse this year. Joe Schoen also asked about the head coaching. The calls you got, I think we're going to be able to fill the job. Schoen was asked for a potential head coach. He doesn't think it will be an issue. I have so many thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. Again, super chat to jump to the front of the line. What doesn't help Joe Schoen, to me, is how he has handled certain situations as a Giants GM. To me, the Saquon Barkley was egregiously mishandled. Because if you were not going to keep Saquon Barkley, they should have traded him either midseason or franchise tagging Tatum. You don't let a player like that leave your building for nothing. Well, maybe a low compensation pick. That's not nothing. And when the owner of your organization, this always strikes me, and it actually brings up a very interesting point, which I don't think is going to help Schoen later in this video. Don't forget on Hard Knocks in the offseason, remember how John Mara was standing in the room saying, I'm going to be devastated. And basically, Joe Schoen sat and laughed, like, don't worry, we'll figure it out. We'll be fine. We'll be fine without Saquon. He's only going to help them win a Super Bowl, help the Eagles be a great team. But, at the same time, Giants right now, this is the thing. The Giants right now, keep in mind, with Jackson Dart, with all this, quote, talent on this roster, they'd be picking number 2 in the draft today, according to Tankathon. And look, maybe Joe Schoen will have a pitch if they finish in the top 2. Maybe his pitch will be, hey, there's going to be teams that need a quarterback. They're going to give us a haul. And with all those picks, I can supercharge a rebuild and a supercharger roster around Jackson Dart. But I don't believe in Joe Schoen. Because Joe Schoen, we keep hearing about how talented this group is, It just seems like it's just the blame game in New York. It's Brian Dable's play calling. Oh, it's the defensive play calling. Look, the coaching has not been good. I'm not going to give the coaching a pass. But at the end of the day, you look at the ingredients, and they have not been good enough. Who is the GM that has kept bringing back an injured kicker where the Giants have had multiple games where they didn't have a kicker or a healthy kicker? Who is the Giants GM that now, because they have not addressed the kicking position over 2 years, you got to see one of the biggest gaffes we've ever seen in primetime with a kicker kicking the ground instead of the football? You see a team that for 4 years has not built an offensive line. The best offensive lineman on this team, isn't even someone that Joe Schoen drafted. It's from the previous regime. So I just look at this as well. And to me, a great example, and again, comment below. Would love to hear your thoughts on the Joe Schoen press conference, the Giants in general. The big thing I look at is also this. Because when I look at the New York Giants, one thing that really stands out to me right now is this last draft. And I'll be frank with you. I think that drafting and scouting is getting incredibly harder. Because a couple years ago, none of these kids had money. Maybe a couple had, money under the table, but nothing like now. I mean, a great example is Arch Manning. If Arch Manning goes back another year of school and comes out, by the time he comes out of Texas, with just endorsements and just what they're probably paying him, he's going to probably have made $25 to $30 million. He's going to walk into a locker room in the NFL never having played a snap and probably be richer than 90 to 95% of the players in that locker room. The NIL is changing the state of college football, but when we talk about the NIL, I think the thing that people tend to neglect is the impact it is having on the NFL. I think what you're going to see now is if a quarterback does not feel they're a top 15 pick, they're just going to keep going back to, well, if I don't become a first rounder, is it worth it to make 1 to 2 million? Or is it worth it for me to go back to school to make a guaranteed 3 or 4 million and work on my draft stock? And what that brings me is to Abdul Carter. Because again, incredibly talented player. But coming out of Penn State, he got some change. And now the problem with a lot of these kids is you're paying them. It's not like they haven't been paid and they're hungry for that first paycheck. A lot of these kids now are getting paid. So now you have to deal with, okay, does this player, I really think one of the big things that scouts are going to have to look at is one of my favorite phrases when dealing with the NFL draft and young players. Do they love football or do they love what football provides? Because there's a big difference. There are guys that just love the game of football, the craft. They want to be better. They want to be the best. And yes, the money is great, but it's secondary, and they know if they play well, it's going to come to them. But there's a lot of players who like what football provides. A grand stage, endorsements, potentially millions of dollars, the chance to be playing in primetime TV, the chance to be a celebrity. And sometimes when you want to be that celebrity, but you're not producing, it comes back to bite you. And you look at Abdul Carter. I, again, thought this kid could potentially be a rookie of the year candidate. But you look back at this draft now, and now you have a lot of questions about it. Is he as good as we thought he was? Again, only a sack and a half. Did the Giants make a mistake by not trading down and getting a bunch of picks? Because a lot of teams are interested in Abdul Carter. Would they have been better off with different players? I mean, you look at Will Campbell and you look at Armand Membu. They've been 2 elite tackles for their team, and they look like they're going to stabilize those offensive lines for those organizations for the next 10 years. You look at Tet McMillan at number 8. How great would it have been to have Tet McMillan on this team? If you trade down a couple spots, got an extra pick, Tet McMillan is your number 2. Now he's your number 1. Still got damn good receiving room. What if you added a great tight end like a Tyler Warren? I mean, I also look at a guy like a Jalen Walker. I mean, Jalen Walker is having a really good season. 5 sacks in the NFL this year with Atlanta. He's looked really freaking good. And you just look at all these great players in this first round of the draft, and not only the impact that they are having, it just makes you question Joe Schoen's drafts. And I mean, you look at how much time, money, and effort they've spent on the defensive line and to blow game after game after game, it just doesn't make sense. And when you look at this last draft for the Giants, Abdul Carter, number 1. Jackson Dart, first round. Darius Alexander, actually has more sacks in the third. I think he's been a great pick. Cam Skabu was a good story until he got hurt. Marcus Embo has filled in on the line, been okay, but then not a lot else. I mean, that 2024 class we're all talking about. Yes, Malik Neighbors looks like a stud, but Tyler Nubin does not look good. Andrew Phillips does not look good. Theo Johnson has been up and down. Tyrone Tracy, we came this year thinking he'd be a number 1, has gone up and down, now is hurt. And again, it's not like Joe Schoen has that premium picks. I mean, just look at the 2022 draft. Evan Neal isn't suiting up for this team. He was the 7th overall pick. And look at Kayvon Thibodeau. Kayvon Thibodeau, I think the Giants are going to be in an awkward situation, especially this offseason. I mean, Kayvon Thibodeau is going to want to get paid. And he's going to look around and say, well, you're not going to pay me? All right, I'll walk. Because Kayvon's going to say, look, when I came out, people said I had a lot of red flags about me, but I've been a great player for this team. Now, again, I don't think he's lived up to the 5th overall pick, but he's been a good player. He's got almost 24 sacks in his career. He probably was playing more like a mid to late first rounder, but still, he's been productive. But I look at those drafts and I just go, I look at free agency. Like free agency, the Giants haven't done a great job. They've plugged holes on the offensive line, sure, but where's been a good sneaky defensive ad that they found? Like the biggest piece they brought in was Brian Burns to the trade market. But you can tell Brian Burns is frustrated with this team. Like if Joe Schoen is here again, does Kayvon Thibodeau going to want out the end of the year? Is Brian Burns going to want to walk out? And I think there's a big thing coming down the road, which I also will think greatly impact Joe Schoen. But I also want to look at this. When you are an organization, don't make the mistake of keeping a GM and letting him hire a coach when the GM's not the nice. Because there's a lot of scenarios, and let's be honest, they're not great scenarios. Again, comment below, give us your thoughts, super chat to jump to the front of the line. My thoughts are this, and I've seen it with the Jets. We've seen organizations that have tried to do this. Let the GM hire a head coach. The timelines are way off. So let's play a fun game. Let's play the scenario game, ladies and gentlemen. So Joe Schoen hires a head coach. Let's say the Giants finish 7-10. At the end of the season, what if the head coach doesn't like the players that Joe Schoen's bringing in? Thinks the roster could have been better. Thinks that the lack of depth will cost them a chance to compete for the playoffs. What if that head coach is going to say, I think we could do better at GM? What do the Giants do? Do you move off of Joe Schoen and then try to pick a GM based on who the head coach is? Does that limit your GM market? It's just so many different scenarios, and none of them are good scenarios for this Giant team. To me, just clean house. I say go after a veteran head coach like a Mike McCarthy. If Mike Tomlin gets fired, I would be at the front door to talk to him. But I just think keeping Joe Schoen's a mistake because I don't think he's good at his job. And you're going to let him pick the next head coach. Well, who are they going to pick? Do you really think this team, especially this young rookie in Abdul Carter, basically, and look, I think he's going to mature. He seemed like he got after the second benching, but the second that basically the head coach was gone and the substitute teacher was in, he's like, you know what? I don't care. So what happens if you bring in a first-time head coach? Is Abdul Carter going to respect them? What if it's a first-time offensive coach who doesn't know how to handle a defense? Is that going to create problems? What if they get a defensive coordinator as a first-time head coach? Like, I just look at the situation and I just don't see anything good. Like, to me, you need to have a clean sweep. But I think one thing that could determine Joe Schoen's fate is also pressure. Because one of the things that Joe Schoen has working against him is something that could work against him again. And that's Hard Knocks. Joe Schoen did not come off great in Hard Knocks because he wasn't able to land the big quarterback in that draft, because he was on camera talking about not keeping Saquon, and that pissed off a lot of Giant fans on how he handled the whole Saquon situation, how he seemingly didn't do a great job handling the offseason that year, and how upset the owner was with some of the decisions he made. Well, guess what? The Giants are going to be on this in-season Hard Knock. Now, again, I'm not exactly sure when they started filming. I'm assuming they probably start around week 7 or 8. But whenever they started, it's going to be right when Brian Daboll was fired or in the really coming weeks after he was fired. And look, there are things the Giants are not going to let out. Again, with Hard Knocks, the Giants have to give final approval. But they're going to have to let some stuff out of that building. And I'm curious to see how it's going to look with ownership. How frustrated is ownership going to be? How frustrated the front office is going to be. Because, again, is Joe Schoen yelling down to Kafka last night with Jackson Dart running the sideline, getting his head pounded in, saying, can you teach the kid to slide? And also after the game, Jackson Dart saying, well, I don't need to slide. You're not going to last long in the NFL, Jackson, and we want you to be a good quarterback in the NFL. And I just look at this team and I just look at how they're constructed. And I'm wondering, how's Joe Schoen going to look behind closed doors? Because again, think about all the stuff that's happened the last couple of weeks. The Giants have not only fired their head coach, they fired their defensive coordinator. They've blown another couple leads. They've had some embarrassing moments that are going to be captured behind the scene. You don't think there's going to be cameras at Brian Burns after these losses? You don't think there's going to be cameras on Abdul Carter? I mean, did these cameras catch Abdul Carter being late for meetings? Is he going to get disciplined on camera? How's that going to play in the locker room? I just feel like when the curtain gets unlifted on the Giants in season Hard Knocks, and again, a lot of it's for entertainment, how it's edited, but I do think Giant fans are going to look and say, this is a rotting carcass, and we just need to expunge the wound. We just need to cut out the parasites and just try to start fresh. And look, in a weird way, maybe it is an intriguing job because you're going to have a top 5 pick. If you want to get more assets, you probably can, or you can get a great player at the top of this draft, and you have a young quarterback to build around. But I just look at the issues. The secondary is an issue on this team. Kicking has been an issue for this team for years. The lack of weapons behind Malik Neighbors is an issue. The offensive line, again, this offensive line when Jackson Dart has played because of his mobility, I think has avoided a lot of criticism, but I don't think it's still a good offensive line. Now, Andrew Thomas has stabilized it, but we've also known his health history. If he goes down, what's this line look like? And look, I just think you need to do your best to protect your young quarterback. And maybe you go offensive line in this draft. We will see. But my big thoughts watching this Joe Schoen press conference, my big things are the Giants are going to come to a critical crossroads. And look, each decision, we don't really know how it's going to turn out. But usually the smart decision is you try to hedge your bet and try to think what's the most logical decision. To me, the most logical decision is clean house entirely, try to get a veteran head coach, and try to get a whole fresh regime in here. Because the Giants, I think part of the reason the Giants have fallen into this trap is they've taken a lot of half and measure steps. They haven't taken big steps. They haven't taken big steps. And that's one thing, like when you look across town at the Jets, yes, the Jets have been bad, but the Jets recognize we got to completely tear this down to the studs. We have to change the culture here. And for a long time, I think what has hurt the Giants is the Giant culture, how respected the Giants organization is. But the sad reality is they've been the worst team in football over the last 5 years. The record does not lie. And when you look at Joe Schoen's record over the last 3 years, he's winning less than a quarter of all the Giants games. That should tell you everything you need to know. Joe Schoen is not the answer to this team. And do you trust him picking the GM? I don't trust him picking the players, let alone picking the head coach. And by the way, who's he going to pick? A first-time head coach? Because Joe Schoen, to me, is not going to go out there and try to get Mike Tomlin or try to get Mike McCarthy, who could try to bully Schoen out and have a power struggle and say, look, I have more experience than Schoen and more success in the NFL. I should be picking who the GM is. To me, Shane's going to pick someone that's going to listen to him. That's someone that he can handle, which means probably a first-time head coach, and it's another dice roll. Do you trust this young coach to develop this young quarterback? Do they go defensive side of the ball? And if they go defense, is they going to find a good OC to develop the young quarterback in Jackson Dart? I mean, these are all very difficult and uncomfortable questions. But to me, the Giants, it's clear. They don't have a good GM. I just look back, and I'm not trying to pick on Joe Schoen, but I just look back at the drafts. They haven't been good. I look back at the free agencies. They haven't been good. And the biggest thing I look for is having the wherewithal to understand where you have holes in your roster and where you need to improve. The fact that Joe Schoen has neglected this kicking positions over the last 2 years is damning because it has cost the Giants multiple games. And now it's become a national punchline. It has. You look at Joe Schoen. He's going to build out this offensive line. Last I checked, the best offensive lineman is still from the previous regime. He got Malik Neighbors with the 6th pick. That's fantastic. What other great, reliable weapons do the Giants have after that? He put all this money and draft capital into the defensive line. That isn't working. And oh, by the way, his number 1 pick, who there was rumblings, had some issues at Penn State. And again, it seems he doesn't have the wherewithal. Maybe there was more warning signs when he came out and said, I want to wear Lawrence Taylor's 56. Maybe that should have been a bigger warning sign than we took at the time. Again, that rubbed me the wrong way. I thought that was not a good self-awareness, but you drafted this kid with the 3rd overall pick, and not only is he not producing on the field, he's now becoming a liability off it. He's becoming a head case. He's becoming someone that, again, you're hoping Mike Kafka at least can control the rest of the season. But you have to wonder, if a future head coach comes in, is he going to look and say, I don't trust that guy, or I don't believe in that player? And look, you spent a ton of draft capital. Like, let's not forget, in 2 of the last 4 seasons, the Giants have spent 2 top 5 picks on pass rushers. The first one feels a bit lackluster, and the second one is not going to meetings, thinks he's Lawrence Taylor and acts like Lawrence Taylor, but the problem is he's not producing like Lawrence Taylor. Yeah, Lawrence Taylor could fall asleep in those meetings. Yeah, we know the stories. He also did a bunch of stuff he probably shouldn't do as a teammate. But you know what he did? He produced. When you produce, guess what? People tend to ignore a lot of things. And you look back at the 2022 draft. Drafted Kayvon Thibodeau, who's been solid but not great. Drafted Evan Neal, who's not even on the active roster. And you just look at all those players that were on the board for them. Drake London, Charles Cross, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Jordan Davis, Jameson Williams, Kyle Hamilton. I mean, you just look back at that draft. There is a lot of damn good players in that first round. And the fact that when you look at it now and you look at what the Giants had for picks and what they did with it, and say what you want, the Jets drafted Sauce Gardner and Garrett Wilson and Jermaine Johnson. Garrett Wilson's still a great receiver for them. Sauce Gardner was the defensive rookie of the year, played a couple great seasons for the Jets, and the Jets just traded him for 2 first-round picks and a wide receiver. I mean, the Giants, is Kayvon going to be a member of the 2026 Giants? We don't know. Evan Neal certainly isn't going to be. I mean, he's lucky to be on the roster this year. And I just look back at the drafts that they've had and the players that they haven't brought in and the lack of development that they've had. Like, I understand Cam Scatterby was a fun player and was exciting for this franchise. But Joe Schoen shouldn't keep his job because he drafted Cam Scatterby. He probably shouldn't keep his job for drafting Jackson Dart, which now he's seemingly having a revisionist history about. You just look at this whole picture. And let me ask Giant fans this. Like, everyone kills Dave Gettleman. Everyone said David Gettleman was the worst GM for this team, that Gettleman set the Giants back, that he didn't know what he was doing, that he made the biggest mistake not trading Barkley. And I get it. You look back, not great, but you look back at that first Giants season where they made the playoffs with Brian Daboll. You know, a lot of that staff, a lot of those players carry over. And last I checked, they made the playoffs with a lot of those players. It's since then when they brought in their own guys and they added their pieces and they brought in their personnel. Joe Schoen's been 11-36. And you look at Joe Schoen, like his total record right now, he's 20. So he's 20-45 as a GM. Dave Gettleman was 19-46. So he's one game better, I guess. I guess. I mean, Dave Gettleman's total winning percentage was 29%. Since that playoff season, Joe Schoen is 23.4%. I'm just saying, a lot of the best Giants. Who do we think is the best Giant players on this team? Coming this year, Dexter Lawrence, Dave Gettleman, Saquon Barkley for years, Dave Gettleman, Andrew Thomas, Dave Gettleman. And look, I don't think that's going to happen, Tony. I love the creativity, though. Tony Alexio, man, he's always something funny. Again, super chat, jump to the front line, your comments and thoughts on Joe Schoen. And, of course, like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our live streams. Yeah, I was thinking about coming on last night for the Giants game, but just how late that game was, And the thing with the Giants and the Jets who I cover, at this point where we're looking at the big picture. I when I do game analysis for the Jets, I tend to look at the big picture. And right now, it's the big picture for the Giants. And right now, Giant fans are scared that Joe Schoen is going to be able to pick the next general manager, that he is going to be the one to make the decision. And I'll tell you, I've covered the Jets. The Jets tried this flip-flopping of not having the GM and the head coach on the same time. It was a disaster with John Idzik and Rex Ryan. It was a disaster under Adam Gase and Mike McCagnon. Don't let that happen. It might not be, and again, there's no great option right now, but at least with the Giants, could you maybe tell me that Mike McCarthy, John Gruden, or Mike Tomlin, if you gave him a big contract, would come here? I think they would consider it, especially with a young quarterback. But I don't think they're going to come here to be a yes man to Joe Schoen. And if Joe Schoen's going to cost you a chance to get a great head coach with this young quarterback, I'm sorry, you cannot waste seasons with Jackson Dart. You're already wasting precious time because you had a coaching staff and a staff that continues to have him running, doesn't teach him to not go out and put himself in harm's way. You need to get a coaching staff because don't bring in a first-time head coach and waste Jackson Dart. We don't want to be here year 2 or 3 with Jackson Dart like we were with Daniel Jones saying, well, we've seen flashes. He looks good, but is he the long-term answer? Kind of gets nicked up, kind of gets hurt. You need answers. You need answers for Jackson Dart and for this franchise. And right now, you have a lot of questions. Abdul Carter, is he going to be a solid player? Is he going to be a player that listens? Is he going to be a headache in the locker room? Is he going to be someone that can be productive? Is he someone that's going to be humbled? There's so many different avenues here that basically should be happening. But look, I just look at this team and just the state of it. And I also look too, I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, but I just don't think that the Giants are in a great place right now. And I don't think that the Giants are in a position to compete, that the Giants are in a position to have Joe Schoen call the shots. Because what has he done to deserve this opportunity to continue to call the shots? What great, amazing draft pick. Finding Cam Scaboo in the late rounds, that's his great find. Jackson Dart, after the head coach begged him to draft Jackson Dart, that's his great find. I just look at the track record with Joe Schoen and just what seems to be the lack of awareness. And you saw it on the Hard Knocks before. If he comes across as that again, and look, the in-season is going to be trickier because it's not going to be as much on the GM because there's not as much moves to be made at that point. But I think you're going to get with Hard Knocks, and I know a lot of it will be at it. You're going to get the general temperature in that room. And I don't think it's going to be good. And I think it's telling because you have your prize rookie not going to meetings and does it once. Okay, young kid, it happens. But have it happen 2 times in 3 weeks, it's not good. And the other thing that happens too is I really believe this. Everyone likes to say Woody Johnson is an incredibly reactive owner, and he is. John Mara is also very reactive. He's fired more head coaches than Woody Johnson has in the last decade. I don't know if you've noticed. If John Mara hears from this fan base and sees the tweets or the X's and the memes of this team again from Hard Knocks, how they were embarrassed during that offseason, if he sees that coming out again from this fan base, I think he listens. I really do. But this might have been the turning point Because in a weird way, I think ultimately the Giants are best to clean house. Like if the Giants somehow pull off that game last night with Kafka and they win like a couple games down the stretch, it's going to be like, see, this roster's talented enough with Joe Schoen. And I don't think Kafka, no matter what he did, was going to be the head coach. But you know what? Shane's put together a good enough roster. But I think last night was a good indication. Because you look at you want a good litmus test against the Patriots, it's this. The New York Jets went up to Foxborough a couple weeks ago. Primetime game as well. With Justin Fields, who cannot complete a forward pass, who basically is scared to throw the football. And the Jets look like a more competitive team with a quarterback that cannot run a functioning offense or throw the forward pass than the New York Giants did with Jackson Dart. Let's be honest, that was a 30-15 game. But Mike Vrabel, from whatever reasons, maybe it's his respect for the Giants, I don't know what it was, but he pulled the dogs off at half. He really did. Because the Patriots, if they really wanted to, they could have put up a 50 burger on this team the way this game was going. And they didn't. I mean, the Giants, again, had some garbage touchdowns, made it a little bit closer. But at that point, Mike Vrabel knew they had that game in the bag. There's also a Monday night game. He's not going to kill his team on a short week as they're competing to try to earn the number one seed. But if you want notes, the Jets traded away two of their best players, have basically a skeleton crew on their defense, have a defensive coordinator that probably will get fired at the end of the season. They had a more competitive game against the Patriots than just with Justin Fields, who this season alone has had three of the worst statistical passing games in NFL history than the Giants did with Jackson Dart. And yes, I know that the Giants have injuries. I understand they don't have Malik Neighbors. They don't have Scatterbo. I get it. But did they look like they were even in the same weight class as the Patriots last night? Do they look like they're in the same weight class as a lot of these teams? And look, the Giants' schedule is not going to get easier. It really isn't. Like, I don't know if they're going to get to 3 wins. Because they have the bye right now. And again, that's probably the best for Abdul Carter. But, I mean, the Commanders, even with Mariota, I thought they played well against the Broncos at home against the Giants. Vikings are a mess. That's probably a win, I guess. Maybe the Raiders. I mean, actually, maybe the Giants win 2 games. But what if this scenario happens, Giant fans? Realistically, what if Jackson Dart wins 2 of the last 4 games, or they win 3 of them? Giants finish with 5 wins. Do they fall for that fool's gold? See, this roster is really great down the stretch. We're really that close. We really are. And look, the problem is it just feels like the blame game right now for Joe Schoen. And basically he's the last one. Oh, this team isn't winning because of the head coach. Fired the head coach. Oh, this team is winning because their defensive coordinator is terrible. Fired the defensive coordinator. Last I checked, they haven't fired the special teams coach today. So all of a sudden, Joe Schoen is losing a lot of fingers in that room, and the one that's left is the thumb. And that points back to him. Why this team is not being successful. That's going to do it for this episode of Rich Sports Talk. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button so you don't miss any of our great content as well. Again, we'll have more great Giants content throughout the season and the offseason. Make sure to like and subscribe. If you want to take us on the go, ladies and gentlemen, you can. We have the Rich Sports Talk app wherever podcasts are available. So if you want to take us on the go, make sure to reach out to our podcast or follow our podcast wherever. Check us out on social media at Rich Sports Talk on X and Instagram. And if you're coming in after the live chat, don't worry. Check out our shorts on the page. And also, if you want to drop a question in the chat or idea for future video, go right ahead. I try to get to many as I can. And as always, thank you so much for another great show. You guys help make this show amazing with the great content you provide and the great questions. Thank you, as always, to the great subscribers to the Rich Sports Talk. If you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of the latest. Thank you, everyone. We will see you next time here on Rich